Discerning Hearts provides content dedicated to those on the spiritual journey. To continue production of these videos, prayers, and more, go to discerninghearts.com and click the donate link found there or inside the free Discerning Hearts app to make your donation. Thanks, and God bless.
DiscerningHearts.com presents St. Teresa of Avila, Spiritual Warfare and the Progress of the Soul, with Dan Burke, who is the founder and president of the Avila Institute for Spiritual Formation. He's also the co-host of the Divine Intimacy radio show with his wife, Stephanie. He is the author and editor of more than 17 books on Catholic spirituality, including Devil in the Castle, the book on which this series is based. St. Teresa of Avila, Spiritual Warfare and the Progress of the Soul, with Dan Burke. I'm your host, Kris McGregor. Dan, thank you so much for coming back. Thank you so much for taking this journey with us, and I'm bummed that we're coming to the conclusion.
Well, it's been fun, and I'm so grateful to be a part of the Discerning Hearts crew. I don't know how to describe that.
Perfect.
But you have really assembled such an amazing group of teachers between Dr. Lillis and Father Gallagher and, on and on. So what you're doing for the church is such a beautiful gift, and I'm grateful to get to participate a little bit.
Well, hopefully we'll be able to do more in the future.
If somebody, maybe if I don't know if I'm going to write another book unless it's under obedience. I really don't like to write. So
okay, Stephanie needs to tell you to do another book.
Well, she did. Actually, she did. I didn't. Yes, she did. But I don't know. We'll see.
God's will. But my friend, this wonderful book, The Devil in the Castle, St. Teresa of Avila, Spiritual Warfare and the Progress of the Soul, is so wonderful. We have received such a wonderful response in the course of our conversations. And now we have come to the journey, which I know people will rush out and get this book. Because we haven't wanted to go into all of it, because really some of it you need to grab the book, sit and ponder, go back over and over again. But in this portion were the battles of the seventh mansion. And Dan, this is only like 2.5 pages.
Well, see, that's the glory of it, right? That's the glory of it. By this point in the spiritual life, and I can most definitively say I'm not there. The battles are non-existent, really, because there's no more attachments. I mean, this is definitely canonizable territory. So we talk about that as the purgative way is where most people are. The illuminative way, there are many good people there, laity, religious, priests, and then the unitive way is a place where people are already saints before they. Any sort of final purification if necessary in purgatory, so they would go directly to heaven when they die. So, and it is possible, of course, for people to reach that in this life. Otherwise, we wouldn't have saints, right? So, it's a beautiful place where we no longer wrestle with sin. And because of that, or attachments, because of that, the devil doesn't have handles, those things he uses to jerk us around. And there's also a profound humility in this place. And humility is the number one barrier, if you will. I don't know if that's a good word. Maybe you have another one. But the number one deterrent or disempowering factor in the soul to dissuade the enemy, to fend him off. He just can't do much when people are really, really humble. And by this stage, people are.
It's a time of great humility, as you're alluding to, in that you don't presume you have the power at all. And so you still need help. You still need direction, you need order, you need balance in a rule of life. And that's, you just don't stop doing those things, right?
No, and you point, we reminded folks of that in the chapter. The secret of staying on the narrow way, once you get out of the purgative way, so the secret of getting through the purgative way is mental prayer. The secret of staying on the narrow way through the illuminative and unitive ways is ascesis. But it's harder in a sense because your humility, I think humility is best understood as like seeing the truth, right, for what it is. Mm-hmm. It's seeing accurately what it is, what we are, where we are. And so, when you see accurately, so even someone in the unitive way is going to see far more how much they need the Lord than someone in the purgative way. Even if they've wrecked their lives or whatever, I know it's a little bit hard to imagine, but it is true. The further in you get, though you are objectively holier, you objectively sin less, you also recognize how incredibly broken you are, and how much you need the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the glorious, beautiful church, the magisterium, the saints, the entire divine economy. You realize how desperately in need you are of all that God has arrayed to bring his people into his heart. And so that sustains you. But because you realize that, you also understand that you have to guard and maintain what you have acquired. So you have to be careful that the more subtle deceptions. I was reading recently in John of the Cross in Living Flame of Love, and he is talking about the transitions between the illuminative and the unitive way. And it parallels Teresa, of course, where she says the more wily demons are in the later mansions, right? And they're more subtle in their deceptions. And something that was sort of frightening to me in a way was he spoke of how easy it is for demons to deceive someone moving from the illuminative to the unitive way. And I thought, oh, dear Jesus. The one effect is, okay, always, no matter how aware you are, no matter how awake you are, no matter how much you practice discernment of spirits and you live the life that we are trying to live and daily ascesis, rule of life, all of this stuff, you still must rely upon the Lord, and you still have to be careful, and you still have to guard yourself. But God be praised, in the seventh mansion, it's kind of a foretaste of one of my favorite passages in the whole Bible, and that is there will be no more sorrow and no more pain, no more suffering. It's in the book of Revelation. And it speaks of that final, beatific encounter with the Lord, where we're done. All the purification's done. All the junk from earth is done. Only what's good is left. And then only moving forward is, what's good remains in front of us. And only, so the seventh mansion is a kind of foretaste. I don't, Teresa and John both seem to question whether or not everyone will reach the seventh mansion. I think there's universal agreement among the spiritual doctors and even our friend Dr. Lillis and others in our time that we're all called to contemplation, but what level or depth we will come to is and up to the Lord in the end, and then also our own yes to Him and the largeness of that has some effect. But in the end, we don't know if we'll reach there. But I love that the chapter for this one idea, and that is the closer I am to Jesus, the further I am from the control of the enemy, the further I am from my own, destructive tendencies, the further I am from my own self-delusion. And I think that's the glory. It's a sort of a glorious end in just a few pages,
Well, in the reality, can I say, and correct me if I'm wrong, that in that passage from the illuminative to the unitive, don't be surprised if there is a degree of suffering
Oh, of course.
That is so acute.
Of course.
But the fear of don't be afraid of that, because guess what? You're going to suffer anyway.
Yeah, right.
In this world, you're going to suffer anyway. And it sounds so bleak. I'm not trying to be a pessimist, but that would be a tactic, wouldn't it, to try to keep you from going?
Yeah, you've made a good point. I mean, I speak of it being kind of scary because I just hate the idea. But as you say, the more you walk with the Lord, the deeper you walk, the more trust you have of him and the less trust you have of yourself. And so that's there's a two-sided coin. It's like, wow, I need not trust myself. That's dangerous. The other side, which I think you're pointing out, is, he's there with us and he'll give us every grace we need. And as you say, we will be purified till the day we die. The question is, how much of it will be with merit or without, right? And I'm going for all with merit because I have no interest in purgatory, if that's even possible for me. I don't know. But I want to suffer with merit. And if those temptations bring suffering, but also, as you know, the suffering comes through just the purification of the constant revelation of God, which is beautiful, which he says, let me show you what keeps you, let's run a little faster. Let me remove this weight from your backpack that you weren't supposed to have and that I didn't give to you. Why don't you take my yoke? It's easier than the one you've made for yourself, and I'm attached to it, so I'll help you. So yeah, we always have the hope, and I don't mean hope in the sense of maybe it will happen. I mean the joyful anticipation of good that is true, that he will always be with us and help us as we draw near to him.
Is it the land? This is a strange way of explaining it, but is it the land of the superabundant virtue? That type that would allow or aid that grace that would allow Saint Teresa Benedicta of the Cross to make a choice and not get on the boat to South America, which everybody was encouraging her, including her bishops and her leaders, her spiritual leaders, but to get on the train.
Yeah, to go to her martyrdom.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And it's at this stage, the soul is really completely detached. It can easily echo at any time the words of St. Paul, to live as Christ, to die as gain. And to summarize him, the only reason I'm sticking around is because he wants me to, and because I love you and I'm happy to do what he wants me to do and what you need, And that's, of course, what we see in the saints. And it is a place, the seventh mansion, and really the sixth and the seventh are kind of joined together in a sense. The seventh mansion is very much a place where virtue is perfected, and the person is perfect in a relative sense, not in the divine sense, right? Mm-hmm. It's a different standard, but perfect in a relative sense, and they are living the full. They're the full. It's that quote. What is it about being fully alive in God? I can't remember who. It was one of the early church fathers, one of the apostolic fathers, but he speaks about what it means to be fully alive, right? And that it comes when you live fully in Christ. And so the person at this stage is fully alive. And so they're the most beautiful they can be in their humanity, in thought, word, and deed, and in their exterior comportment. I think we think of certain saints that really, when people came near to them, I think John Paul is in this category, that I remember a non-Catholic talking to me, was one of the executives at Campus Crusade for Christ, who went to Rome and was in the proximity of Jesus. And this is a guy who's rejected the Catholic Church. He said, I felt when he passed by, something went through me that touched me to the core of my being. And so John Paul, I think, and also a man with flaws, interestingly enough, that we discover more and more as time goes on. But I firmly believe in his sanctity at the same time. But it just gives you a sense of the effect of the beauty of a soul. I do believe he was likely in the unitive way, and he probably had to be technically to be canonized. But funny thing though is this doesn't mean that people who are saints are without flaws, right?
Oh yeah,
all of the saints had flaws to some degree or another. Some we know because of the nearness to us in history. Others, if we were nearer to them, we would know. And Teresa, our focus of discussion here, was, I think, sarcastic to the end. Made fun of John of the Cross and called him a half friar, and because he was short, and and argued with God as a good descendant of the Jews does. So it's I don't know. I think it's such a beautiful. I don't know what people think about when they think about all this stuff. To me, it's just beautiful. It's beautiful in its brokenness. I don't know how to explain it other than that. It's because God makes all things new. He makes all things whole. And so he shines through, like in our weakness, he is made strong, St. Paul said. So
he loves us anyway.
He does.
I mean, if he didn't love us, as Thomas Aquinas would tell us, we wouldn't be here.
No, we would cease to exist. It is his love, the Catechism says, I think in the prologue, if I remember right, it's his love that actually is the reason we exist and we aren't in hell or wherever our final destination would be.
Yeah, the thing that really strikes me about, as you're describing this, it's really the response to that universal call to holiness, that call to wholeness. And that once you're in this seventh mansion, that wholeness, you're there. There's the King. There's my beloved. That's it. And it's that nothing else at this point. It's not that other things don't matter. It's the good. It's the love. It's they're the right things matter. Maybe.
Yeah. And even critics of the Second Vatican Council, like Bishop Athanasius Schneider, who I have a great reverence for. And he's not a critic in the sense of destructive. He's a kind of saying we should clarify these things. He said recently that the universal call to holiness was one of the most beautiful, good, pure aspects of the council. And I agree with him in that it calls us, and it says the folks in the collars and the habits aren't all the ones who are just supposed to be holy. And I think it's what I love about Teresa, because even though she was in a habit, her letters reveal, and her writing, she had to write in code, right? Because of the Inquisition, which was sometimes friendly to her, the Jesuits were sometimes friendly to her, sometimes not. And, when she says, this is just to my sisters, that's code language. Because if you read all of her writings, like, Dr. Lillis and I wrote a book on her letters, she reveals in the letters where you can see the code words used, right? And this is to everyone, because she gave her brother a hair shirt as a gift. So if that doesn't tell you most people, I guess, might be horrified by that. I don't know. And if the audience doesn't know, a hair shirt is just an extremely uncomfortable shirt that's intended to wear to help us to do penance. But if she's doing that for a brother who's a layman, she knew very well that she was speaking to her sisters and to the world. And she also used analogies and examples in both the Book of Her Life and in the Devil in the Cat, or in the Interior Castle, that indicate she knew her audience was wider. She's just trying to stay out of trouble. But we're all, God be praised. This is for us. The writings of St. Catherine of Siena are for us. The writings of Augustine are for us. It's in us, I'm meaning all flesh, right? Everyone who wants to ascend. We have different states in life, but, I always think I have the greatest sympathy for moms with, like 300 children under the age of 7, and how hard it is.
I only had 3, and it was hard.
I had 3. Right? But how hard it is to live that existence. And I could think, well, or maybe some of our listeners have state in life issues but let's just talk about that mom. The beautiful thing is if that mother does her best to honor her state in life, right? Mm-hmm. And she does her best, so she's not undisciplined. She's, she of course is dictated when she sleeps and when she rises is often dictated by the children. But insofar as whatever is under her control, she seeks to order to God. And let's say she can only get 15 minutes of mental prayer in a day, and it's interrupted by having to nurse while she's doing it, which I've heard can be a very beautiful experience. She will not be deprived of the grace to reach the heights of contemplation. This is just the beauty and the blessing of our God. So a Carmelite nun has to pray 4 hours a day and live by a pretty strict rule and never eat meat and use the discipline every Wednesday, and all of these. They do, but that's the vocation that they're called to. But a mother so you can have a Carmelite nun on one hand praying 4 hours a day, and a good holy mother imperfectly working on discipline to the degree that she can, and she's doing all that she can. They will ascend similarly by the mercy of God. And I just love that. I love that about our faith, that it's not just like this class, like in the early centuries of the church, you had the Gnostic heresies where it's just only this elite group, right? And the Universal Call of Holiness is saying this idea and all of its construct is nonsense. Dan Burke, father, husband, Kris McGregor, wife, mother, can be a saint, and God has given us everything we need to do that.
We'll return to St. Teresa of Avila, Spiritual Warfare and the Progress of the Soul with Dan Burke in just a moment. This is Kris McGregor of Discerning Hearts, a nonprofit Catholic apostolate dedicated to evangelization and spiritual formation through the use of new media. Discerning Hearts creates engaging multimedia specializing in audio and video productions which are faithful to the teachings of the Roman Catholic Church and its rich, authentic spiritual tradition. Its mission responds to the Church's call to use the media for evangelization, catechesis, and spiritual renewal. We have made a commitment since the beginning to make the truth shared through Discerning Hearts totally free to users throughout the world. Besides our website, discerninghearts.com, Discerning Hearts has a newly updated free app where users can find all their favorite Discerning Hearts programming, including Father Timothy Gallagher, Dr. Anthony Lillis, Deacon James Keating, Mike Aquilina, Dr. Matthew Bunson, and so many more. There, too, you'll find numerous beautifully produced devotionals and novenas, including the Holy Rosary and Stations of the Cross, to help users create a sacred time for prayer wherever they may be. Discerning Hearts programming can be found on numerous streaming platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, and so many more. Discerning Hearts also has an ever-growing YouTube channel. Discerning Hearts online spiritual retreats and seminars have helped souls in North and South America, Europe, Africa, Australia, the Middle East, and the Philippines. For many people all around the world, Discerning Hearts is a daily source of inspiration, spiritual nourishment, and encouragement. We can only do this thanks to the generous financial support of our friends and benefactors. Please consider donating to our mission today. The world is looking for answers, for spiritual guidance and authentic discernment, for relationship and community. Your support is very much needed and appreciated. Please keep our mission in your prayers and tell a friend about Discerning Hearts. We now return to St. Teresa of Avila, Spiritual Warfare and the Progress of the Soul with Dan Burke. I think that's why your work is so important, because many of those religious orders have the foundational elements, whether in the writing of their founders or in the structure of a continuing format, a rhythm of the day, a rule of the day, that helps them to maintain that. In our lay experience, that hasn't always been there. And I think that's what you do so well, especially in the next section of the book. Everybody's seen the book. What's next? because that's, the cry of the heart of everyone who goes there. You're speaking to me. This, I understand it. Now what do I do?
Yeah. Well, and so Teresa can sometimes sort of hang out in the clouds, right? Mm-hmm. In this beautiful, glorious language and experience. What I tried to do, she comes out too, but what I tried to do in the book at the end was land it in a way that 100% of the readers, my goal, I'm not really capable of it, but really worked hard, that 100% of anyone who picked it up, of the people who picked it up, would come to a landing and review a set of very practical principles, and very specifically, how can I apply them with regard to mental prayer, with regard to staying awake, understanding the irreducible complexity of discipleship, meaning what are the handful of things that if I give myself to the Lord in and through, that I will know and keep making progress in the castle, even though if I read her works, I'm not, I don't have a concise clarity. I brought it to a concise clarity. And the question I asked, we may have talked about this before, but I wrestled with this for about 5 years, and I have a little whiteboard on my office wall, and I would think about it, pray and write, and I've published a handful of books during that time and edited other books on authentic Catholic spirituality, and I'm reading the saints, and then I would change the diagram, and then it was not right. Then I would change it again, and finally one day I thought, okay, this is close enough. I can't get it any closer, which is what I call the paradigm of ascent, which is paradigm is just a model. It's just you can think of it as an illustration or a framework or whatever. But the paradigm of ascent is true in the life of every single saint who has ever lived. And that is, all of them have a yes to God. All of them had deep sacramental immersion. All of them had this conversation with God. All of them had ascesis. And I've oversimplified in our conversation, but it's in the book. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, we lay out exactly how to do those things. And then at the very end, give a whole bunch of resources for folks who want to continue on the path that the book prompted them to. Because, it's cool. If you mind if I give you a neat report?
Please do.
So I taught the first class at the Avila Institute using Devil in the Castle, but I taught it totally different than any other class. And that is 80% of the content was student contributions. Mm-hmm. And so, as you know, at the end of every chapter, except chapter 7, I think, the seventh mansion, I have these questions. So the whole class was answering the questions, and then we come to class and we talk about it. And it is so powerful when, like you and I are doing it now, right? I mean, we reveal a little bit about our lives. We've done this for the series and our wrestling, but it's so powerful to be in a room with people who are all striving after God. But what the book did that surprised me, delighted me, was the content plus the questions created a level of self-awareness that I've never seen in students before. Discernment of Spirits does that to a really powerful degree. But this book, because it's sort of, I don't know, I feel like a divine blessing in it, that it just has the right balance of, here's the reflection from Teresa. Now, what does that mean to you? Here's the reflection. What does that mean to you? And it causes you to get up into this divine conversation with you and God, you and Teresa, maybe you and your spiritual director. And it really broke open for many students, from priests to religious to laity who were in the course. It brought new light. And I think that's the power of the saints. When we draw near to them, they illumine the path in a way that we hadn't received otherwise. And when there are saints, in the sense that it's like the Carmelite path is my path, it really is like aircraft landing lights on the narrow way. And you really it really, it ministered to me to bring clarity in my own walk. And anyway, I'm rambling, but I just finished the course, and I'm just so excited what happened to the students.
Well, I'm happy to hear this, because I mean, that's the experience I had in reading it, and I've shared that with you, that there was oftentimes where I read it and I'm like, oh,
oh gosh.
And it was like, oh, that can't be right. What? I'm reading this. And then I went back over again, and I'm like, yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
But that is what you want. What's the point of exercising? What's the point of going deeper if there isn't it? If it's just a slide down, the slippery, a slope or something, that's not the journey we're on. It's not the journey the Lord, revealed to us in his own life,
Yeah. And I think something that I love about the saints, I tried to emulate in this book, and that is not watering it down. I don't like to put the cookies lower on the shelf. I like to build a ladder to the upper shelf, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And, that the noise you made earlier, I've had many people talk to me like that. But I make the same noise. It's like, oh gosh. So I said that that's very hard what I just wrote. Is that, and I go back to her and so, okay, this is very hard. And they even worked with the editor on this, who was a very holy woman, Angela Cybulski, awesome human being. But we would wrestle back and forth with, well, how do we is it clear enough that we can get people from the, to what do I do about it, right? And I think we've succeeded in more than any book that I've written, at least at the level of substance of the Interior Castle, which is, I think, the most important book ever written in the history of the church on prayer. And I may be overstating it. I don't know if Anthony would agree, Dr. Lillis would agree, but I do. I think it is. So anyway, it's very. I didn't like writing the book. It's a penitential act to me, but the outcome has really been beautiful.
Well, I think it's a culmination of so much of what has come before in your writings. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that feeling that you get, because you are seeking self-knowledge. I mean, if you're looking, the mistake is if we're looking in a spiritual book and I don't know if you can say this as a long, broad, sweeping thing, but if you're looking for knowledge, then you might just get that, but it won't take you anywhere. But ultimately, these great books should lead you to self-knowledge. Yes. And that is what you have to be open to it and trust that the Lord is guiding you, and the saint that you're reading is right there with you in reality, right?
What you just said is incredibly important, and I think it's a huge danger. And I can't remember. I recently did a video reflection on it. I don't remember exactly where I put it, but the danger is that we read these kinds of books for knowledge rather than for relationship. Mm-hmm. I wrote the video I put out. It's called Contemplative Living and the Implications of Belief. And that is the example I give is a pastor one time told me that I didn't love anyone but myself, and that I was incredibly selfish and self-centered, even in my self-giving. And I just about wrecked me. And I through tears said, what do I do? Because what you're saying isn't true about the deepest part of who I am. I'm imperfect in my love, and I do have mixed emotions. But what your experiencing of me doesn't reflect what's in my heart. And so, even though I need to be healed, how do I get out of this? And so he said, memorize 1 Corinthians 13. And so I did. If I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but I do not have love, I'd become a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. But I came to this one passage where it says, love hopes all things. And I thought, well, I don't even know what hope is. So I looked it up. I looked at definitions. I don't know. What I came up with hope is a joyful anticipation of good. So I thought, well, what are the implications of me hoping, having a joyful anticipation of good of Kris McGregor? What would that look like? What it would look like is no matter what happened between us, let's say we had rough patches in the past or some issues between, no matter what happened between us in the past, when you saw me, you would see, it's you, right? It's so good to see you. I didn't know we'd run across each other here in Rome, or gosh, it's, what's going on in your life? And so it's just this, it's an effusion of love for the other, for the good that we expect God is doing in their life, So when we read these books, if we don't use this principle of what are the implications of my belief? So I read this spiritual book, I believe this thing. Now, what am I going to do about it? Because if you don't do that, Francis de Sales reveals that that's a dangerous thing to do. Because God is giving you the knowledge for the purpose of love and expanding the kingdom of God and to give yourself. If you keep it, then you end up where Paul describes. He says knowledge puffs up and love builds up, meaning you can have a kind of knowledge that's destructive. Elsewhere, of course, he speaks of this knowledge of the sublime wisdom of God and all of these beautiful things in Ephesians. And he uses the same word, but the context helps you to understand. One is a knowledge that is self-centered. I want to know. So that I can be in control, so I can be seen as wise or spiritual, or that I can be seen as knowledgeable. The other one is, I want to know because I want to love God, and I want to eradicate everything in me that keeps me from doing that. And I want to love his people, and I want to eradicate everything in me that keeps me from doing that. In fact, almost brings me to tears.
I'm already crying.
Yeah.
You got me. I mean, that's it, right?
That is it. That's it. So to everyone who listens to everything that Kris does on Discerning Hearts, I have this challenge for you. What are the implications of belief? Because what she's constantly doing is serving the church by giving these beautiful, holy conversations to you. Now, what are you going to do about it, right? Because if you're not, you're in danger, and you need to evaluate why you're consuming what you consume. But if you are, you're going to become a saint. If you constantly say, okay, this is new, what do I do? And I've even noticed with good, devout people, like not just active Catholics, but devout Catholic people who are going to Mass every day, who actually want to be holy, but who can't seem to get out of the bonds of their root sin, I should say, or their things that they struggle with. Like, I don't know everybody's root sin, but this one thing is missing. It's I encounter truth. Do I live it versus just thinking about it? Because to go back to an earlier portion of The Devil in the Castle, that knowledge, the self-knowledge, I'm aware of my sin, the devil will quickly then have you judging others and criticizing others, and you develop a critical spirit. This was another surprise in my classes. If I remember, I'll come back to it. But the knowledge can be used to have a critical spirit instead of knowledge that is humbling, that seeks to lower ourselves and to wash the feet of others, But what was shocking to me back on the critical spirit thing is in this class, the vast majority, every student is practicing mental prayer. I have prereqs, right? And every one of them is using discernment of spirits as a prerequisite. Most of them said they suffered with a critical spirit. Recent, past, present really bad, all the spectrum. But that's what happens when we don't deal with me. God is showing me now, how do I love him and love others more through what I know now? When we don't do that, it's very dangerous.
Oh, you're so good. You're so good, my dear brother in Christ. I am so grateful for you and for your work and your beautiful bride, Stephanie, and everything that you're doing. I just wish we could talk so much more. But
you and Bruce come down and hang out with us. We'll talk.
Oh, I do. I want to. I really do. I know. I'm totally serious.
And you know,
I'm ready.
Everyone's listening. We're still on the air, so I have to be careful what I say. It is you know, there's no cost. And you will be fed like you've never been fed, and you know, you'll be able to wander around the lake. And so anyway, I'm ready.
But the thing is, I just want to, before we close, there's so much more, especially in the back of the book. There's encouragement resources. I can't encourage people more to dive in deeper into the work that you're doing. The fruitfulness of your apostolate is, I've known, I can't name them all, but I think of the joy in the hearts of Karen, Kathy, Jim, Paula, Teresa, I could go on, name, and it's all so beautiful. It's a great cloud here on earth. You know, it kind of mirrors what's happening in Great Cloud of Witnesses. And are they all perfect? Or am I? I'm so not perfect. But it's so lovely. Mm-hmm. It's so lovely. And, you know, it's beautiful. It's a beauty to gaze on with those eyes of your heart. Yeah. You know,
and to walk together, you know, in our brokenness, to chase after the Lord and to know Him, encourage one another. And I think I've always thought of discerning hearts as like, I'm not territorial, which is sometimes not to my benefit, but spiritually it is always. But I always think it's like we are, I wish there were 5 more discerning hearts, you know, out there. But what we do is very symbiotic, is a way to say it, where you're constantly prompting people, and some of those people come take classes at the Avila Institute, and it's because of the fire that you've sparked in them and encouraged them, and they're going, well,
what's next?
Yeah, what's next?
You're the what's next for so many souls on Discerning Hearts listening. You're the what next. I mean, how can you go in? It's the lay response, the place to go. Yeah, I mean, what's beautiful about you, even the offerings you have online, I'm going to say this, I'm going to try you, you're going to have to correct me. Again, you're my big brother in faith. But, you know, there are those out there who would have you try and buy, you know, try us out and you can buy, you know, and then buy this, buy that. And my experience with those souls around the world outside of the United States, Dan, that's so off-putting. They're so repelled by that and we don't see it because we're steeped in it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Well, we have the marketing culture, and I think, like you, what we try to do we've given away $1 million in scholarships since 2013. Mm-hmm. And that's because when we started, my passion was to somehow serve the poor in their suffering and their lack of spiritual care. And so we everything in Apostolic VA community is free. We have more volunteers there. We have to pay professors at the Avila Institute. Everything you do is free. And I think it's because we believe freely we have received, freely therefore we give, as St. Paul said in Romans.
That's it.
Come and get it.
Yeah, please do. I'm coming. I'm going to bring Bruce. We have got to do this. We got to make this happen. But in the meantime, for all those, just forget about us.
Yeah.
Do get this. Get all the other works. We have the links. And, again, if when you have a moment out of your busy schedule, if you ever want to go down another journey, down and explore a different area, let's do it. Right. I keep calling you, and you're my big brother in the faith, my dear friend. Thank you, Dan Burke.
God bless you.
You've been watching St. Teresa of Avila, Spiritual Warfare and the Progress of the Soul with Dan Burke. To view other episodes of this program, along with hundreds of other spiritual formation programs, view the playlist list below, or you can find them at discerninghearts.com or within the free Discerning Hearts app. There, too, you can download the podcast versions of these conversations. This has been a production of Discerning Hearts. I'm your host, Kris McGregor. We hope that if this has been helpful for you, that you will first pray for our mission, which is to offer authentic and rock-solid spiritual formation freely to souls around the world. And if you feel us worthy, consider a charitable donation, which is fully tax-deductible, to help support our efforts. But most of all, we hope that you will tell a friend about discerninghearts.com and join us next time for St. Teresa of Avila, Spiritual Warfare and the Progress of the Soul with Dan Burke.